And you've just heard Spectrum, the title track from the album by Marcas Mac. And I'm delighted to be joined by Marcas now. Hello, Marcas.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. I'm really well. I've really been enjoying the album. What can you tell us about it and why did you want to make it?
I think it was a bit of an experiment, if I'm totally honest. I think with me being a Yorkshireman, but still wanting to be part of the Gaelic music scene, I was originally kind of reticent to position myself as a traditional singer, as a tradition bearer, just because there are people out there within the community who have got much more of a grounding in it and are better equipped to do it. But I also felt there were opportunities to take the language forward into other genres, and it just came out of a passing conversation with Marianne, and she said, well, let's do it. And with that, I kind of had to do it.
So it was almost a conversation that became the reality.
It was, it really, really was, because I didn't have a huge amount of experience really musically beyond singing with Trosk, things like Celtic Connections and Belladrum. That's a male voice traditional Gaelic singing group that was started in Inverness around Inverness Gaelic Choir. So I sang with them for a while and was involved in Boer Frosh as well, and a few other things. But primarily in the creative sense, I'd always really positioned myself as a writer. And that had kind of led me into songwriting right enough. But yeah, as a singer, this project really is the main one that will see me taking center stage, as it were, in my own right.
And it's interesting because I was thinking there is a lot of more modern Gaelic music out there than a lot of people maybe realise, but this is the most pop orientated that I've heard. I might be wrong about that, but is that fair to say?
Definitely since the 80s. I mean, there's a few bands that were kicking around then, the 101 band and the Solish Guy, who were there in the 80s trying to kind of meld the language with the sounds that they were hearing on the radio at the time. But they kind of packed up by the time I was on the scene in 2003. And that's when I started learning Gaelic at university. So yeah, there's a lot of great music being made by particularly young Hebridean artists and Highland artists, but it still remains very much faithful to the tradition in terms of taking those roots and maybe sampling them, remixing them, reimagining them. Where this is different is that we kind of go the opposite direction, in that we take the pop music model and we add the Gaelic language and all the sensibilities that come with the language through the lyric writing to that kind of framework.
And I'm interested in what the influences, the music side of it, what were the influences on it?
Yeah, well, it kind of depends on who the collaborator is that I've been working with. So I shall know, like, the main, I would say at least a half of the album I wrote and had produced by Nick Turner up at Watercolour Music, and he very much into the 80s kind of side of things. So in a way, the work that I did with Nick picks up on where those other bands that I mentioned left off, and then we kind of take it forward through the 90s. That kind of 90s R&B sound inspired what I was doing with Adam Holmes, and then there's some more up to the minute contemporary sounds with what I was doing with Gary Keenan and Rod Thomas.
Yeah, because there's kind of almost dance music aspects to it as well.
Definitely so. And so that gives a nod to what's already happening. That means that people can situate it within the contemporary music landscape, but also enjoy all those kind of retro influences as well. So, you know, you'll hear a nod towards Martin Bennett, you'll hear a nod towards Nightworks with Adie in particular. But yeah, there's a touch of the old Pet Shop Boys in the 80s stuff and Soul to Soul kind of sound in the 90s stuff, maybe.
And I wonder if you think that perhaps makes it more accessible. You know, a lot of more traditional stuff, partly it's sitting and listening to what's being sung, but here, you know, you get up and dance.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that we were looking for that kind of blend as well. I mean, the thing with pop music and a great pop hook is the the immediacy of it. It gets you straight away, and if you like it, then you listen to it again and again and again. And so we wanted these earworms that that you just can't drop. But you know, there are roots of the tradition in this music as well, particularly in the collaboration with Rachel Walker. There's a duet on the album there with Rachel, who I write a lot with. And you know, Adi, as I say, came out of its traditional meter that was written in response to a poem celebrating the Edinburgh's University Highland Society. That was originally written in traditional meter and set to music by Patrick Morrison. But then, yeah, we took it forward into the contemporary era in terms of the production, which kind of makes the most traditional song the most contemporary at the same time, which has been really exciting.
And are there any plans to take these songs and play them live or do something live with them?
There are, yeah. It's a case of kind of waiting for the right moment between coronavirus and my own kind of work commitments as well. But the conversations are happening, and the aspiration would be to perhaps just get it on the road and take it to some small venues to start off with. Perhaps venues like SW3 or ones that are, you know, to Hootenannies, maybe in Inverness, ones that are connected with the dance scene, perhaps, and to just kind of start small but to get it out there and then see where that takes us.
And how's it been received?
It's been received really well. You know, it's kind of hilarious. Every time I put out a new video, you know, there's always a response, oh, this needs to be representing Scotland at Eurovision, you know, which is really heartwarming, you know, that if people, you know, consider it good and good enough and kind of exemplary enough to represent the country. But in general, Raging and Gale have been fantastic about it. It's been album of the month or album of the week on CamGlen anyway, and on all the other programs as well. And it's been great to see response from the other Celtic nations, particularly Ireland. There's been a lot of radio play in Ireland, and some of their radio DJs, Lisa Judge and Sean Doohan, for example, they've really supported me right from the first single release, actually, in the Isle of Man as well. So we're hoping that, you know, as time goes on, we'll be able to kind of bring it to the other Celtic nations as well, because a lot of what's happening out there, particularly in Wales and Ireland, is a great inspiration to me. You know, how these minoritized languages, these Celtic languages, are still being used within a contemporary context, and that getting to know what's happening down there and just listening through has been a real kind of eye-opener to us throughout this process.
Yeah, because I hadn't considered that, but in the 90s and 90s in particular, there was a lot of Welsh bands who were singing in Welsh language, and you know, there was nothing thought about it.
No, that's right. It's very normal for them, and there's a real kind of diversity of genre going on, not just the pop stuff, in fact, not so much the reimagining the traditional side of things. That's not really what they're going for. It's all contemporary songwriting, whether it's hip hop, whether it's rock, whether it's pop. And so that's really great to see. Yeah. So I kind of, yes, I can see how this work fits in within a Scottish context, but I think realistically it's better situated within that wider pan-Celtic context, really. And
it may be far too early to say this, but would you continue to do music in this style?
Yeah, definitely. I think part of what when we applied for funding to Creative Scotland, the kind of funding stream that we applied for was definitely about, you know, developing new talent and finding a voice and that kind of thing. And so that was the reason behind working with different people, so that it was as much a mentoring process as it was a recording project. And so it's definitely been a great way for me to kind of experiment and to find out where I might fit musically, creatively. And so, yeah, and I just love doing it. And I'm always writing new lyrics all the time. You know, making some demo tracks there just on Reaper the other week. So, you know, the future looks bright for it. And yeah, hoping that it'll bring some additional commissions. I'm going to be doing some further work with Ross White
Yeah.
for Ceollis Crach. We did a little preview night of some new songs that we've written together for the Stratach and the Straja project. So we're soon to be meeting again to talk about how we bring that music forward. So there's definitely more on the way.
Because with the album, it feels that collaboration is central to it and a really important part of it.
Definitely. I mean, they say that it takes a village to raise a child. It's definitely taken a village to build a Spectrum. But that's been the joy of it. You know, I'm really, really fortunate that, particularly with Marianne and Nick and Rachel, but also all the other people, you know, they've been incredibly supportive of me finding this voice and making this music. And so it was a way to kind of bring well, not everyone, but as many people as possible that I've worked with previously, to kind of bring them all together into one place and really kind of celebrate those creative conversations and those lovely relationships that have been built up over time.
And as well as a musician, you're a writer and poet. And last time I spoke to it was about Polaris, your latest collection. Can you tell people a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to be reading from it at the Edinburgh Book Festival on the 22nd in the afternoon with Peter Mackay and Cathy MacDonald. So please do come along. It will be, it'll be great to just get the poetry out there. This is, again, it takes a kind of pan-Celtic kind of perspective as well with that poetry. It's just aims to be a post-colonial retelling of the history of these islands. It foregrounds those unheard stories and unheard voices, and it's done really well. We're getting ready to promote the second edition of the book, so it's been selling really well, and it'll be really great to take that forward and to meet people who've been reading it on the road.
Yeah, because now it's been out, you will be getting feedback from that as well. And when we spoke, you said it was something else that was kind of resonating across Celtic languages and Celtic cultures. Definitely.
It's definitely both projects are absolutely built on inclusion. And, you know, recognizing that, you know, as creatives, we don't stand alone. You know, it was John Donne that said, no man is an island, wasn't it? And I think that's definitely the case with me. You know, I am more than happy as a creative to acknowledge, you know, where my creativity ends, where my competence ends, and I'm more than happy to bring somebody on board and make sure that they're paid for the work, you know. So it's been really nice to get the translators on board so that they can bring in their languages as well, so that poems and narratives which are about these specific parts of the world, whether it's Cornwall, Wales, Isle of Man, so that, you know, these poems are given back to those communities through their languages. So yeah, Polaris has been really special, and I have to say I've had an amazing time working with Leamington Books. I really can't praise them highly enough, and the future is really bright for all of the authors on that roster, I think, at the moment.
I mean, both projects seem really kind of very special ones as well.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they kind of represent passion projects, really, and Lockdown in many ways kind of, whilst it was frightening and there wasn't a lot of work coming in, it kind of presented me with a situation where I had to find something that I really, really wanted to do in order to get me out of bed and to get me up and about and making things. And so the writing of Polaris, you know, I got the commission. I plotted out what the stories I wanted to talk about were, and used my Pinterest, and I did a huge amount of research, and I just set myself the task of writing a poem a day, and that's what happened. And with Spectrum, you know, we were hugely thankful to get the support of Creative Scotland. This wouldn't have been possible without them. But you know, whereas Polaris is kind of reflects me journeying to these places through music, through history, through TV and film and all the various sources that have inspired it. You know, Spectrum has really taken me on physical journeys, you know, going up to Fort William, working with Adam here in Edinburgh, you know, working with Gary Keane, who's from Ireland, you know. So yeah, it's been an opportunity to kind of think deeply and consider deeply about how Gaelic is connected to the rest of the world, as opposed to being, you know, an insular kind of community on the far northwestern extremity, as you might say. It's been a really rich experience of, you know, encountering other cultures and learning all the way.
Well, Marcus, always a pleasure to chat to you. Thank you for taking the time to do so.
No, thank you for having me. And if people are interested in the album, they can check it out on Bandcamp. Please do pick up a physical copy or an MP3 copy if you are listening on Spotify.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is Marcas Mac and Balt na Fara.